Are we live?
Okay.
Okay, so
yes, it is.
Thanks, Indu. I would like to welcome you all once again to the EU-India People's Summit. Right now, we are having three wonderful speakers on the data privacy and surveillance issues. And as you know, our viewers may know that this is one of the very critical issues also in EU-India relationship, where we are thinking of having a digital single market. However, while in the European Union, we have GDPR, and in India, we have a legislation modeled upon GDPR, there are certain issues which are not absolutely clear. And before I go further, I would like to first introduce the esteemed speakers that we have today with us. I have with me Professor Joe Cannataci. He's a UN Special Rapporteur on the right to privacy since July 2015. Professor Cannataci is also the head of the Department of Information Policy and Governance at the University of Malta, and you are also the chair of European Information Policy and Technology Law within the Faculty of Law at the University of Groningen, where I also work. And he's also the co-founder, he also co-founded the STEP research group in the University of Groningen. Professor Cannataci is also an adjunct professor at the Security Research Institute at the School of Computer and Security Science at Edith Cowan University in Australia. And a considerable amount of your time goes into collaborative research, and you have written books and articles on data protection, liability for expert systems, legal aspects of medical information, copyrights in computer softwares, and co-authored various papers and textbook chapters on self-regulation and the internet. You have been recognized for your service to academia by the Republic of France, and needless to say that you have played a pioneering role in the development of technology law and especially privacy law. So welcome, Professor Joe. Then I have with me Osama Manzar. Osama is a global leader on the mission of eradicating information poverty from India and Global South using digital tools through Digital Empowerment Foundation, an organization that he founded in 2002. Osama is also a British-having scholar and an international visionary leadership, Visions Leadership Program Fellow of the US State Department. Osama is a social entrepreneur and author, columnist, impact speaker, angel investor, mentor, and sits on several government and policy committees in India and on international organizations working in the area of internet access, digital inclusion, and misinformation. Finally, with me, I have Hindol Sengupta, who's a public speaker and author of several books. He has been a researcher with the Observer Research Foundation and has recently worked on issues like impact of unique personal identification, use of digitization in delivering welfare funds, COVID relief, and potential use of tech AI in the land records management. So for this panel, it is going to be a conversation-styled panel, and I am going to start with the letter that Professor Joe Cannataci wrote to the government of India in 2018 in his role as a special rapporteur. And I'm going to first introduce a little aspect of the right to privacy and then come to the specific interventions before I come to the speakers with some pointed questions. So as you may all know, right to privacy is a fundamental right in India following the Puttaswamy judgment. And yet those working with digital technologies like Osama and Hindol here are, and in India and South Asia in general, are aware of not just the issues with the government surveillance and the corporate surveillance, but also our general issue with a very nosy personal relations to the technology itself. We have seen since the Cambridge Analytica that massive amount of personal data stored by big tech companies as well as governments can lead to change of social and political narratives. Each can affect social cohesion and psychological well-being. Each can lead to majoritarian governance and creation of echo chambers. And at its worst, it can lead to shrinking of civic spaces and genocides, as we are witnessing in the last certain years in parts of South Asia. So, Professor Cannataci, you have mentioned in your letter from 2018 that you have raised specific issues of consent in collecting data or processing personal data in India. I wanted to know from you, does these concerns still stand as we have moved ahead from 2018 to 2021? And how strong are these concerns at this point in time, also given the fact that we have seen the shrinking of civil spaces and growing surveillance by the Indian state? So, Professor Cannataci.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's so good to speak with so many people who are interested in India and love India like I do. In fact, for many reasons, since I've been a child, a lot of people think that I look like an Indian. And when I am in India, people start speaking to me in any one of a number of Indian languages. But let's not be anecdotal. Yes, I am still worried. I am still deeply concerned. Because while it's certainly a good thing that since the Puttaswamy judgment in 2017, we've seen more awareness, and we've also seen the continuing debate on India's new data protection law. But in fact, does the all new efforts in India, really deal with some of the fundamental problems which have been there for a long time? So, and I will not even start with the advanced electronic ID systems or other systems. I will start with something which is much more fundamental in what is the world's largest democracy. The world's largest democracy has also got a very large, at least 16 intelligence services, right? And let me read to you something that, if I look here, it's because I have at least 3 screens here. Let me read to you something which was published in an academic journal in 2011. And I'd like to ask anybody, I'd like to ask everybody listening to us whether anything has changed, right? So let's apply this simple test. Not what I said, since I was special rapporteur, what other people have said before the United Nations ever dreamt of having a special rapporteur. India's intelligence services are as notorious for their civil liberties abuses as they are for their intelligence failures, right? And then in this article, which is entitled "Not a Very Intelligent Attempt at Intelligence Reform," right? Which I can give you the references to because I'm reading from it here. This is something which sparked my request to meet the ambassador of India at the permanent mission to the United Nations. And I said, can we meet? May I come to India to investigate further, right? The Indian government has never taken me up on my, expressed wish to come to India to help things, as a critical friend, as somebody who loves India. I would really like to see this forward, because ask yourself the following questions. Does India have a modern, updated law which takes into account the work of intelligence services in the 21st century? And the answer is no, right? Has India made the same attempts? And I'm not saying that they're entirely successful attempts, but if we look at Germany, if we look at the United Kingdom, if we look at France, if we look at the United States, they've all made attempts since the Snowden revelations to try to upgrade their laws. So I ask, where is the independent oversight authority with responsibility for oversight of India's intelligence services? Where are the privacy safeguards, both internal and external? I am not saying in any way that the state does not need an intelligence service. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying in any way that the state does not need security. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, if you're really a democracy, then you need independent oversight of this. You need a clear law which states this. And I don't see that. And in the same way as India's chances of, for example, receiving positive evaluation by the EU when it comes to its compatibility or adequacy which is the EU term, adequacy of its data protection laws vis-a-vis vis-a-vis the EU, people will say, okay, fine, you have the right to privacy in your constitution, and we've got very nice judgments, as we've had in Putuswami. Yes, but what are 1.3 billion people in India going to do about that? Where is the real effective safeguard? And in law and in life, unless we have proper safeguards and proper remedies, we cannot go forward. And India's citizens are today ever more present on the internet, ever more present through their smartphones, but they are not being properly protected. Let me stop there because I would like to hear what the other panelists have to say, but we can get back to many of those subjects later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Cannataci. I would like Osama to intervene in here and perhaps give us an overview of like how, because where Professor Joe left on the aspect that India is massively digital at this point. We have massive amount of people on Facebook, WhatsApp, all kind of digital technologies. And I would like to hear from you, Osama, that what is the ground perspective on the right to privacy, in not just in how you work with the people, with the communities, but also the understanding of the community itself. Is there a concern on the right to privacy at all amongst the people of India? So
let me share this joy of listening to Joe Cannataci. I mean, he was talking as if that he was sitting in a small village in India. He was so much insightful, which was nothing to do with legality or the security and all that, but the real impact or the real issue of what kind of policy you make and how do you make it people. And that is exactly what, because my expertise is not the law and the policy and all that, but my relationship with all these policies and everything is that how does it really relate to the masses, relate to the people, and especially in the digital era. And I'm glad he said about the intelligence services. I was thinking what kind of intelligence services you can have if you hardly use the intelligence. And you are motivated by feudality, you are motivated by authoritarianism, you are motivated by control, you are motivated by inequalities and all that. So whatever policy you make, whatever safeguard measures that you take, at the end of it, it is a matter of intention. Do you really want to make it functional for the people, or you don't want to make it functional to the people? Incidentally, and I don't agree with you when you say that a lot of Indians are going digital, which is actually not correct. Their shadow is going digital, they are not going digital. That means my data is digital. My information is digital. I may not be digital. I have no idea. I have 700 million plus people who are on a daily basis rely on daily ration. I cannot access that without POS machine and without authentication of my fingertips. But I have no device, I have no connectivity, I have no digital infrastructure. My data has been digitized. I have been told that without the authorization, online authorization, you will not have your bread, and that is how it is. So that means digital or the dataization has been made compulsory for me without providing the digital infrastructure to me. So, my individualization, my control system has been taken through the digital means or digital footprints without really giving me the ammunition or the weapons or the literacy or the infrastructure to me to safeguard myself. It is a huge issue as far as the masses of the country is concerned. We are gradually, in the last 10-15 years, we have become almost like data dependent or digital dependent, so much so that it is leading us into exclusion. And you are seeing how the dataization of the people is happening, but the humanization of data is not happening. It is quite ironical is that whether it's a private sector or whether it's government, the entire intention is not to serve the people, but to use them as a data point or as a data collection to either use it as a business proposition or use it as a control mechanism. Or in the name of security, you are basically taking authority to control you. So this is very, very important that when you make policies, what's your intention? On one side, you can say that collecting data on individual identity card is to give you the food on time. But the point is that you are at the same time making it so strict and so dependent that you are excluding millions of people for accessing the same food for which you said that it will be meant for. So what's your intention? When Facebook started collecting data, they said that I want to connect people, but they started using the same data to create a narration that how to win the election for a certain party or not a certain party, or create a narrative. So I would say, and by the way, data and digitization is something which is very top-down model than when we are making policies. What is the meaning that data people understand? Does mass understand the meaning of data or the meaning of privacy or meaning of security? I don't know. In a multicultural and a joint family system of India, where we have never kept anything secret, we never kept anything private in our life. We grew up like that. I don't even know what is the data and how to keep it secret and safe from somebody else. We have no idea. Even today, more than 50% people do not have a bank account or do not use bank account. I mean, what is their money is also not private. They keep it in a locally, family, public places. And then you are talking suddenly one day how to keep your username and password private and secure. So there is a huge cultural dimension also that is there, that unless people in totality understand the meaning of data, understand the meaning of privacy, how are we going to be seen that where is my privacy being challenged or the security being challenged? And it has got a very misinformed connotation. I would end by, just before giving it to Hindol, I would like to narrate you one very small real story about 6 months or 8 months back. In West Bengal, where we just concluded the election, we were doing digital literacy in a village. And there is this person, this lady, who actually goes and does digital literacy and collects data of everyone that she does digital literacy. So she had collected data of 500 girls that she had done the digital literacy. Suddenly one day, all the family members started beating her as soon as she went to do her session. And when they are asked, why are you beating this lady? They said that she has taken all our data. She will now sell it to the NRC, and then the government will identify us and actually put us out of our state. So we will be identified by our data because we have come to know that our data has been collected by various kind of people, and they are giving it to the government, and government is using it to identify the minorities, and they will be basically dislodged. So now here, suddenly the data concern was very deep, even the most illiterate girls and women in a village, but in a different way. So, I mean, this is just, and it's a real thing, it was all over in the news that Digital Empowerment Foundation was doing this, and then their soldier was got captured by the villagers and so on and so forth. So, we don't know. I mean, suddenly we become very, very emotional about our information. And then on the other hand, we don't mind sharing any information, because if you don't share your information, you will not get your food, because it is entitlement based, it is rights based.
Thanks a lot, Osama, for bringing in this grassroots perspective to it. Here, I would like Hindol to step in and perhaps tell us a little bit about the project that he has worked on the unique personal identification, particularly, because that was a government-led project, and Professor Cannataci also knows about it. And all of us perhaps knows about this particular identification process, which is also in some ways very similar to how the burger service number in Netherlands is, or the citizen service number in other parts of the world is. But there has been consistently massive amount of concerns on data privacy and the use of the data for political purposes. So Hindol, how do you see this whole process?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really nice listening to Professor Cannataci and Osama Manzar. So I want to look at it in a bit of a perspective. I want to take off from what Osama was talking about the cultural aspect of many Indians not understanding what privacy really means. So privacy, like everything else, means different things in different countries and different cultures. But that's only one part of the story. After all, privacy also has a universal meaning which transcends, there's only so far that we can use cultural relativism and say, well, Indians don't really understand privacy. That would not be very helpful. Obviously, there are people who understand it and value it. And when it comes to something integral to them, they obviously respond with great force, as depicted from the story that Osama told us, right? Of the incident that he told us. I think the digitization journey of India is really a journey. And I think often when comparisons are made with different countries, I think we're still at a very different stage of digitization. This is something I explained in great detail in a paper that I wrote, just finished writing. At the moment, a lot of people in India are concerned by or with digitization from the perspective of delivery. What can the state give me more quickly, more swiftly, better, and in greater quantums using this technology? So when, for instance, digital technology is being used, the Aadhaar program was just mentioned. The Aadhaar program was being used to deliver government funds to thousands and tens and thousands of people around the country. Now, that doesn't mean there may not be certain instances where things are going wrong, but it is undoubtedly true that there are many, many, many instances where people are genuinely getting the money in a manner, shape, and form that they are unaccustomed to and at a speed that they are unaccustomed to. So that in their minds is a win. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that the technology itself might have issues that people are pointing out. Is it secure enough? Are there leaks of that data that are happening? This issue comes up from time to time. Number two, and something that I wrote in my paper recently, how much of India's digitization process really has inbuilt feedback mechanisms where the people in whose name this technology is rolled out and who are ostensibly the beneficiaries, how much of their feedback is really looped in at a regular basis to strengthen the system? Or is it really a sort of top-down, one-way process? And I would say that at the moment, at least, maybe a large part of it is a sort of one-way conversation. There are mechanisms to gather what people are saying on different platforms, but it certainly would be no one's argument that those processes cannot be strengthened. They can be strengthened and they should be strengthened. As far as delivery mechanisms are concerned, including with Aadhaar, we cannot forget that the journey that began from Aadhaar today has come to something called UPI, and many members who are listening here today would recognize UPI as the transaction system, digital transaction system of India, which seems to notch up, really millions and millions of transactions and ever rising numbers of transactions, right? I mean, today and I travel extensively, at least until COVID stopped my travels, I travel extensively in very, very remote parts of India. And in the remotest parts of India today, you will find people who are willing to take, a digital-based transaction, which actually many of them cannot even use a phone to actually see if the transaction has worked. They need a sort of loudspeaker device which shouts out the amount of money that has come in, right, for them to register their transaction has happened. And this is, of course, at tens and thousands and millions of instances around India. Now, this is obviously making people's lives easier at a particular level. But we have to constantly keep coming to that point, whether it's Aadhaar, whether it's UPI, we have to come back to the point, how much of the feedback mechanisms of the people who are using it is really flowing back to making and strengthening these systems better. And that feedback mechanism, I would argue, is something that needs the next layer or the next generation of work on digitization in India would have to look very carefully at these feedback loop mechanisms. And this feedback loop mechanism, now, of course, when you talk about feedback loop mechanisms, you have to ask the question, well, whose feedback and how are these people going to give this feedback anyway, right? And there, of course, immediately there's a question of equity, because it depends on how educated the person is, what technology they can use, what access they have, how are they able to share this, where is this information gathered, in what manner is it going to be presented, and will the state, incorporate those changes? And indeed, the companies who work on digitization incorporate that feedback to make these changes. These are the steps, I think, that need to be now focused on and propelled in India in order for its massive digitization work to strengthen. Because it is quite clear to me that digitization at various levels will transform and is transforming India. Now, whether it's transforming India absolutely for the good, some of it is, of course, good, but whether it's transforming India in a manner where some of that data is being misused, of course, is a concern that we really need to look at with great care. So the question of using the data to create internecine violence among communities was mentioned. That, of course, is a problem. And I used to be a journalist for the longest time. The problem of fake news is very, very prevalent in India. And more people are using digital mechanisms. I mean, I know many organizations which are doing a lot of very interesting work trying to fight these issues. But at a bigger level, I think if you ask me, what do a large number of people today feel about digitization? I think we are still at that level in the journey of digitization of India, where people tend to feel that it has made many people's lives just a little bit easier, including, one of the things that I have seen from my own experience. I mean, my own father, who's a retired government officer, no longer has to, go and show his face at a bank to receive his pension to prove that he's alive. Now, of course, I come from a place of great privilege. I am educated. My father was a bureaucrat, so I come from a position of, of privilege. But this sort of cutting out of red tape has helped many, many more people than just people of my class. But again, we cannot ignore the question that while it has helped many people, how much of their issues of accessing that technology has been taken into concern. Let me end by one illustration. At the moment, India is going through a mass effort of trying to vaccinate, millions of people, and the entire process is driven through a digital mechanism. There's a website or an app. You need to go onto the website. You need to register yourself. How do you register yourself? You have to use that Aadhaar number. That's how you register yourself. You get a date, you select a date, you go to that center, and you get a jab, which is what I did to get my first vaccination this morning, right? Now, while this, and when one goes to a center like that, one sees the value of this kind of organization, because already the number of people who are turning up are overwhelming many centers. If you don't have this kind of structure, then it would be impossible with any kind of social distancing to be able to give this vaccination to people. However, the question remains, how many people actually, or what number of people are not able to use such a digital technology to go and register themselves in a particular way, get that information, and who are the people who are falling out of this entire scheme because of the use of this technology?
Yes, Hindol, thank you very much. This is really pertinent because at one point we have this whole massive public usefulness of the digital technology, but on the other hand, we have this question with which Professor Joe also pointed out, that we need to know what kind of parameters are established by the government not to use this massive amount of data for the purposes which are not conducive to the development or the growth of the people, or for the purposes which the people have not consented to. And I come from India myself. I'm now in Europe. I see the differences between these two nations very clearly. And I would like to go back and perhaps play a little devil's advocate over here to ask again on this aspect of consent itself, that is the government doing enough to record the consent of the people that it is aiming to serve? Because I can give you from an anecdotal example from my own life. I was researching in Assam, and I was researching on the migrations happening in Assam. And the government official there, they handed me down the entire voter list of the government of India in a CD drive. Yeah, not on paper, nothing. I can use that that entire raw data of the government of India to map out where the voters are. Yeah, and this really concerns me, that the amount of data that the government has and the ease with which it can hand it out to researchers, or just people that they may know, and just the people they might want to be willing to please, and also to the political parties on the other hand, because we have seen the use of data by the political parties. We have seen the digitization of the electoral rolls by the political parties, and use of those electoral rolls for influencing the voters. So I want to know from Professor Joe, that where do you see this this massive divide of where once we need the digitization to help people, but on the other hand, the government or the parties in power can use that digital information to also influence and create a lot of political influence in the society. So first from Professor Joe, then from Hindol, and then Osama, perhaps.
Okay, hang on. Let me see. Okay, I'm not muted. Where do I start? Because this is really one of these discussions where, regrettably and fortunately, everybody is right in their own way, right? So Osama was rightly pointing out, perhaps implicitly more than explicitly, that we are not looking at a homogeneous picture in India, right? Any more than we're looking at one at Europe, but it's a multi-speed society. Some people are going very fast and in this digitized society, and some people are going so slowly for many reasons, including because of the fact that they are not fully digitized or digitized at all, right? And the infrastructure in India is very much one which is also at different speeds. You cannot compare the center and the facilities which are available in the center of Hyderabad or the center of Delhi and the center of Mumbai to those in rural India. You simply can't, right? This is not a problem only in India. There are many other countries which face the same issues. But in India, we must look at something else. And you will permit me to take this opportunity to remind you of something. India has a very old civilization, mixture of civilizations. Yet, where is the debate on what privacy is in India, out of Indian culture? Let me give you a few reminders. So, and then to explain something not for my Indian listeners, but for the non-Indians in the group, including some, I mean, if I had to speak of the Adivasi, right, which is a modern Sanskrit word, but which country? This is supposed to be a seminar on the EU and India. So let's talk about the EU for a minute. Which country has in the EU has 104 million people? None. The biggest is Germany, right, with 83 million or something. Yet, there are 104 million people in India who belong to various indigenous communities. Who in India has been asking these indigenous communities or researching or exploring their conceptual ideas about privacy? Who has been looking at Indian notions of individual privacy and collective privacy as they have evolved in India throughout the ages? I have seen not one single reference to this in all the debates on privacy in India, right? So if you ask me, and I would be proud to see something made in India, what's made in India about the new laws? Where do we see a deep examination, a conceptual examination of what privacy means to people in India and what has it meant in India throughout the ages? I see none of that. So perhaps is this because although this number is larger than that of the biggest EU nation, is it because these only represents 8.4% of people in India, right? Is it because the majority, the 96%, but each one of these has a life, each one of these has dignity, each one of these people has identity, right? And I fail to see how this is being translated into the public debate in India. You asked me about have things changed. Listen, I mean, when the latest changes were announced, and when on the 7th of this, I don't know what you were doing on the 7th of January and the 6th of January, but I was busy looking at how many were there? 84 amendments to the Indian privacy law. I mean, Section 35 alone, got so many people going against it, right? I mean, what kind of government insults the intelligence of its people by telling them that, but the government has a right to exempt itself from everything? Yeah, right. Is this really, either I have not understood the language it was put in, or else, like many others, right, including Judge Krishna, who even earlier on in 2018 was looking at the bill and saying, hey, we're heading towards an Orwellian state. No, a democratic government does not draft things this way. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Either they've hired incompetent lawyers, or else they don't really know what the world of 2021 looks like, or else they want to compete like other large countries which want to put CCTV everywhere, which want to deal with social credit information, which want to have a social credit system. If that's what India wants to belong, that's fine. But until I last looked, it said it has a democratic constitution, it wants to be a democracy, and it has a Supreme Court which fights for privacy. So, let's kind of be consistent in our arguments here, right? It would be as if I would put up my hand. Yes, I am a declared non-smoker. So would you like to see me go into a place which specializes in Havana cigars, however good they may be to other people? I mean, that's not consistent behavior, right? So I'd like to see laws written in the spirit and the wording of Puttaswamy judgment, right? And I'd like to see laws which respect Indians, right? And I'd like to see laws which respect Indian culture. And I have seen none of that, right? And I have not seen, what is worse still, I have not seen any serious attempt. Let us not forget that simply by saying we have a law which reflects GDPR, fine, it's progress of sorts, but on the other hand, it also elicits a response from me, big deal. GDPR was not designed, was never designed to deal with secret services and intelligence services and national security. Can you please tell me how you're going to deal with it? Because it's not as if you may not, it's not as if India doesn't have intelligence services, or as if they don't have a reputation for certain actions, right? So there is a lot to deal with. And my main regret today, that it's 1:15, I want to shut up, And you are tackling me on a subject which could have me going non-stop for the next 5 years, just privacy in India, because it has so many dimensions. There are so many dimensions to Indian culture, so many things which have got to be taken into account, so many things which need to be respected, that for a government to respect it, it needs to do its homework properly. And I leave it up to you to decide which mark you would give to the government led by Mr. Narendra Modi in this particular set. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Cannataci. And you are right to say that this is a discussion which we can carry on forever, and rightly so. And also on the remark on how I personally would judge Modi government on their privacy scores. But I will give the floor to Hindol and Osama to intervene and make their representations on that. Thank you.
No, so it's fascinating. Of course, Professor Cannataci is. Let me take his first point on the Adivasis, and what kind of work has been done to really include them in the whole digitization story. And this is a very, very valuable question. And I want to add that to what you, Ritambra, said about officials of a particular Indian state who handed you an entire set of records on a CD. Right? Did they know what they were doing? Did they know that they shouldn't be doing this? I mean, there is a fundamental problem of literacy, not only outside the state, which is where people like Osama Manzar do excellent work, but often one feels, and felt as a journalist, that there is a problem of digital literacy, even at a sort of, hands and legs of the state level. All states are sometimes problematic in their behavior, but in India, there is a particular problem that people may not be aware. I mean, I genuinely don't know, and I wish I could go back and ask, and you could go back and ask, if the people who handed this CD to you knew what they were doing is so very problematic. Did anyone ever tell them that this is a really problematic thing? You cannot have a researcher come to you and ask for this, and you just hand it over to them, because you have no idea what would be done with that data, with that information. Just
to clarify your question over there, I asked them on how many D-voters are there in a particular district.
Yeah.
And instead I got the whole D-voter record, a raw data from a government official sent to my Circuit House residence at that time. And I had to go back and ask them that, is this ethical? Can I use it? And ultimately I decided not to use it because of my own ethical standing. So
there you are. So exactly. So may I just say this, and this will sound funny, but it's absolutely not funny. It's horrendous. For all you know, there would have been a low-ranking bureaucrat who thought it would be much easier to give you this raw data dump than actually parse out what you needed in a particular way that you will only be able to do your work and not be able to misuse it. For this person, for whatever reason, he was like, okay, I just want to get her off, out of my hair, so to speak. Let me just give her this, because there is no value in that person's mind, right? And this is a huge problem. This is a massive problem, because there is a lack of understanding of the value of these things. I want to connect this to what Professor Cannataci was saying about a little more than 8% of India's population not being part, which is a real problem. But why just that 8%? I mean, I would argue that in many ways, 50% of India's population, which is women, how much of the conversation of digitization involves a conversation from a feminist point of view? It's a big question. And we can have 2 more sessions maybe only on that, right? It's a big question. And, especially since this panel is loaded with men, even a more important, point to raise. Now, but why are not many more people objecting to this vociferously, right? And there I go back to the point that I was trying to make, that at least in the work that I have done and conversations that I have had with people, when faced with these questions, many people often respond by saying, Are wo, and I'm going to use Hindi and then, immediately translate it. Wo to jaldi mil gaya. I got that quickly, so it's okay. Right? Such is the friction of getting basic goods of governance traditionally and historically in India, that speed overpowers many people, or in many people's minds, all the extremely valid issues that this panel is raising. However, that doesn't mean, and we shouldn't make the mistake, that these people therefore don't value their privacy or their data, because as from Osama's earlier anecdote, we know when it comes suddenly to something really valuable, people do and are often ready to go out and protest, often in very strident, ways, right? But we are still at the beginning of the curve in that conversation, where many of these issues are not being debated, deliberated, contemplated, and where the entire focus still is very much speed of operations, volume of operations, and therefore showcasing impact through both those two things. Let me end by making an analogy from the world of education. It's a bit like we used to critique our old education laws by saying building a building is very good. It keeps these students away from the weather, but that doesn't necessarily mean outcomes in learning, right? So we have to go from, in digitization, from building that building to measuring outcomes in learning. That's the journey we want to be.
Thanks a lot, Hindol, for this really needed intervention, and also pointing out about the feminization of the feminist perspective of the data in India, because you're absolutely right there. Not only there is a much less amount of concern there, I don't think the Indian female have any privacy even in their private life. Forget about the cyberspaces. With this, Osama, on to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, everything has been said, and the good thing is that we are talking about data and privacy and all these things in a very non-technical manner, in a manner that it relates to the individual and the masses, which is a great discussion, and that's exactly what was required. I would only say is that it's very important for all of us to think and pressurize that, in the last 25 years, ever since the digital has started coming into our role, perhaps even till today, we consider digital and every aspect of digital as a technical issue or a technological issue. It's very important that we see that entire holistic relationship of the role of technology in our life, its adaptation in our life, in its implication in our life, so much so that, as I told you in the previous session, that when Google asked to share, use Google Map, the intention was only to provide the direction, and if there is a traffic jam. And I gave my data and I started using, for a very simple reason, that I get a good direction, I get a pre information about the next red light, or so on and so forth, or reaching in a place without memorization. But when I travel 2,000 kilometers from Delhi to Pondicherry, from where I am speaking, when I was driving, by the time I reached Pondicherry, Google started using the whole data by selling a product by the time I reached Pondicherry. So, they started giving me data for a simple social benefit or a commercial benefit. But then I became data myself and I became a product myself. Now, this whole thing is an implication of not only technology, that whether I'm using an app or whether I'm using a mobile, whether I'm using a bandwidth, whether I am using connectivity, but it is as social as that every toll that I am passing, I am leaving a footmark, and the government is watching that I have crossed 8 tolls, and I am at this point of time here. Google is watching where I am, and then you have provided this data to the raw or intelligence department, and I am being tracked or I am being sold, and in the next red light, you know, just because I liked coconut water on my way, there is a coconut water wala is coming in the next red light and selling the coconut water to me. So the whole implication, do we know how does it change our life? Does it, I mean, do we know, do we plan our civic sense? Do we plan our municipal sense? Do we plan our housing sense? Do we plan our behavioral sense? Do we plan our etiquette? Do we plan our, so all those is not the job of the people. It is the job of the government. And therefore, to envisage that this simple technology is no more a technology, it is now a culture, it is now a script, it is now a language, it is now a behavior, it is now a social and society. It is affecting those who are connected. It is also affecting those who are not connected. For example, misinformation is not only affecting those who are connected. Misinformation is as much affecting those who are not connected by the rumors, you know, and you start getting lynched and so on and so forth. So the idea is that when Puthuswamy judgment gave the meaning of privacy, it is the meaning of privacy and its importance of privacy. The lawmaker now has to think not like the law you write for the privileged, because in any case, the privileged will overcome the law. They will get whatever they have. The laws are never made, the policies are never made from the privileged perspective. Unfortunately, we have started making technology and policies from a privileged perspective, and you know, and then under the barb of efficiency. We need to create policies from the bottom up of the last person, which Joe actually said about, you know, that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if there is only one tribal population left in one particular village. The point is that the policies and because this is for protection of people, this is for safeguarding the people. That is why you make policies. And when you make those things, you take care of culture, civilization, tradition, practices, caste, creed, religion, individual, everything, you know, that matters. That is the most important thing. And as you know, professor was saying, you know, how many times do we discuss the cultural issue? How many times do we discuss that the lady who is in my joint family, in the house, she keeps her scarf all the time, her face shadowed under that one, is actually, as soon as she get out of the house, she just throws it away because there is no relative around her. I mean, inside the house where she doesn't have to be private, she was private. And when she leaves the house, when everybody outsider, when she goes, which nobody knows, she actually take away her burqa or a veil or whatever, the sari or the pallu or whatever. Suddenly her privacy is no more required, even the unknown people. That's a cultural issue. How do you put that into data protection? How do you put that into a privacy issue is a serious thing, you know. My children are sharing with 3-4 Instagram accounts, which I should not know and the world should know. So that I should not know that my daughter or my son is having 4 accounts to share some kind of information that they don't want us to share. You know, so these are all issues that we need to figure out in making the policies and all that. And I hope when it comes, it takes care of that. The cultural issue, the civilizational issue, the linguistic issue, the practice issue, the habit issue, the socio-behavioral issue, all those things. And that is very, very important. Unfortunately, the lawyers and the writers are too educated perhaps to do that, but it will be really required for them to take care of that.
Thanks a lot, Osama, for this. If everyone has just like 2 more minutes, I have one question which has come up in the chat, and this is really important and goes again to the idea of consent. It says that the Indian activist who was recently asked by the courts to download Arogya Setu app, which is the health app for monitoring COVID, etc., and as a precondition for his bail. Is this an unwitting confession by the state that there is government surveillance? Anyone would like to take this question, perhaps?
Hindol would be the right person.
Well,
I don't know about this. This is I heard about this only from this, so I don't know I haven't read this judgment and I don't know the details of it. But I do know that Arogya Setu definitely, one of the things about Arogya Setu was that to begin with, it was downloaded by more than 100 million people and so on and so forth. But there were some questions about its architecture, for which then clarification had to be later on sought and was provided, I believe, by the
I
organization
see
that made it.
Professor Joe leaning forward perhaps to answer this question.
well, actually, Hindol was saying half of what I wanted to say, because I think it is a bit much to say an unwitting confession, right? But then there are many unwitting things done by the state. I think that we have to look more carefully at the Arogya Setu app, and we should be back to answer that question in a different session from today. And I say this for two reasons, if you permit me. One, as you know, I have made a very detailed set of recommendations on privacy and health data to the UN. And I think that one of the exercises that should be carried out is taking one Arogya Setu, but then all other types of medical data used in India, and see to what extent are we in conformity, in compliance with the recommendations that I have made. Secondly, I'd like to have my final intervention of the day, if this is going to be it, about something very important which has just been mentioned both explicitly and implicitly by the previous speakers. And those relate to the relationship between privacy and other dimensions of the right to a free development of personality. You cannot and must not take rights out of context, and you cannot cherry pick about rights, right? When you ask yourself the question, why privacy? Why should I have a right to privacy? Osama was talking about his daughter, right? And his son, but let's pick on that, right? Firstly, I would like to refer everybody to my recent report on gender and privacy, right? And in March of this year, I presented a written report, which perhaps I will also present verbally on the 2nd of July and on the 5th of July of this year in the Human Rights Council, and it relates to gender and privacy. Where specifically I am stating that, and I'm sorry, this was last year's report too, but I went back to it in my report about children. When last year, after 2 years almost of working on the subject, we produced a second version of the report of gender and privacy, I was trying to point out that privacy is experienced differently by different genders, not only in different cultures. And I'm saying this because I would like everybody to ask themselves the question, to what extent is privacy linked to my right to decide who I am and how my personality should develop? Everybody in India is a unique person with the right to free development of personality. At this moment in time, I have no hesitation in saying different Indian women within different dimensions of Indian culture, within different Indian cultural traditions, and as you well know, there are many different cultural traditions within India, right? They all experience privacy in a different way. And when you ask, to what extent are they using privacy to help achieve their autonomy and their right to self-determination in the sense of free development of their personality, I am going to get many different answers. And one thing that I would say is, you were talking about, and Osama was so right about the contradictions about what is public, what is private, where it is public, where it is private, right? But I would also ask you to think about one thing that Osama was mentioning implicitly, which is how many Indian women and how many Indians who question their gender identity? How many Indians who are trans, lesbian or gay, find or create spaces in cyberspace which are more private than the space they have at home or in their immediate community? And that is where I suspect many Indian girls, many Indian women would tell you that they have more privacy, or they think they have in some spaces in cyberspace than they have at home. And I think that this is something that Indian society should think about, in the sense that you cannot have a discussion about privacy, although it is a universal right, without also looking at the values that a society wants to have. Does Indian society really want to give every single Indian the right to free development of their personality? It is only when that question is honestly answered that you can have honest and accurate answers about the direction in which present and future privacy legislation can take in India. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Joe Cannataci. And I would like to thank all of the speakers over here, Hindol, Osama, and Professor Joe, for being with us today on this very interesting discussion around the right to privacy. As the organizer for this EU-India People Summit, our intention is to create certain roadmaps, which are the people's roadmap, which EU and India both should take seriously in their diplomatic dialogues, which are very close diplomatic dialogues going forward. And we will be working with at least the European parliamentarians and the parliamentarians within Netherlands and Germany to kind of feed them back the things that we observed from these discussions. And in that process, I might be coming back to you for certain clarifications and for setting those agendas, because this agenda will be our agenda, our people's agenda going forward in the future. So I would like to thank you again for being here and for such enriching discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Thank you, Hindol.
Bye-bye.
Great meeting both
Great
of
to meet you.
here.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.